are no extraordinary items known. And this was part of the ceremonial section on Friday the 28th of October 2022 under statutory declarations. The important part today is that new councillors have the opportunity to address the meeting. And I'm going to invite those councillors in the following order, which looks suspiciously like alphabetical. So Mr. Andrew Baker from Pukekohe is going to address us on his brilliant contributions coming up.
Well, good morning, everyone, and it's actually quite interesting being on this side of the table for a change instead of sitting over there. Look, it's great to be here. I know that some of you here view me as one of the newbies, and I sincerely appreciate the words of welcome and advice. Like anything in life, you learn something new every day, good and bad, fair to say. I feel though after 12 years on the Franklin Local Board, most of that as chair, I actually bring a unique perspective, an unparalleled understanding of what life is really like within the other arm of our shared governance model, as well as a pretty well-formed understanding of how council operates. It's an immense privilege to have completed my apprenticeship and to have earned the trust of the people of Franklin again. By and large, a collection of communities still struggling to get their heads around being part of Auckland, and with real suspicion that actually, as mentioned within the report Reimagining Tamaki Makaurau, not all parts of Auckland are treated equitably. Maybe we need to tell the story better. Maybe we need to actually do a better job meaningfully mitigating and addressing those suspicions. The reality probably lies somewhere in the middle. Council is 12 years old, and like so many 12-year-olds, we're seeing some significant changes, and when we look in the mirror, we do have a few pimples we need to deal with. I sense a real desire for a change in approach, which I applaud, as long as we get the balance right. As a council, we can achieve so much more if we actually put some meaning into the term empowering. Whether we are actually empowering and trusting our staff to make decisions at the appropriate levels, empowering and trusting our communities so we actually work together instead of feeling the need for council to do things for or to communities. Let's do more with our communities. Or whether we actually deliver the intent of our founding legislation by trusting, empowering and delegating appropriate decision-making responsibilities to our local boards. We have a great opportunity not to radically change, but take what we have learned over our council childhood and adjust for our difficult teen years. Perhaps we need to remember the wisdom of the community will always exceed the knowledge of the experts. Our communities are not clients. They are people willing and expecting us to make good decisions and wanting to be part of the decision making. I want to acknowledge my good mates Des Morrison and Bill Cashmore, who have set a standard, but I need to make it really clear I am not a 2.0 version of either. If I can make one plea from 12 years of being sometimes a visitor and sometimes a participant of discussions around this table, it is about using our time and those here having to listen to our debates and discussions efficiently and economically. I think best summarised by a couple of quotes. Speak only if you can improve upon silence. And a favourite of my grandfather and my father in their political lives, who both had it on their office wall and one you will soon find on mine, it is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Oh, that's for me, a reminder for me, obviously. But I just want to acknowledge everyone. Thanks for the opportunity, and I wish everyone the best for the next 3 years.
That sets a very good standard. Could I invite Councillor Julie Ferry from the Albert Eden ward?
Thank you. Just noting it's the Albert Eden Puki Tāpapa ward, so if we could have that corrected on the minutes, that'd be great. Thank you.
I apologise for mystically reading.
I know, it's not your fault, it's okay. Ina mana, ina reo, e rau rangatira mā, tina koutou. Ko Puki Tāpapa, Puki Wiwi, Mount Roskill, Te Maunga, Te Ru nei, Taku Nākau. Ko Te Aonga, Oakley Creek, Te Awa e Mahia nei aku mā harahara, no Kaipatiki ahau. E mihi ana ki ngā tohu o nehe o Tamaki Makaurau, e noho e nei o. Ko Julie Ferry tōku ingoa. In reverse order, my name is Julie Ferry, and I acknowledge the ancestral people and landmarks of this place, the whenua that we do this mahi upon, Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. I'm originally from Kaipatiki, Glenfield on the North Shore. Te Aonga Oakley Creek is the awa or river that eases my worries, and Puki Tāpapa, Puki Wiwi, Mount Roskill is the maunga or mountain that speaks to my heart. Greetings to all, to the many leaders, to all voices and to all authorities. I start by acknowledging those who have come before me and whose shoulders we all stand on. May we in turn be good ancestors too. I acknowledge also those who have helped me to get here, family, friends, a small village of childcare helpers, total strangers on Twitter, shout out to you, the campaign team, my hairdresser, and of course my community. Sincerely, thank you. I want to take this opportunity to particularly acknowledge Dr. Kathy Casey, who retired as councillor for the mighty ward of Albert Eden Puki Tāpapa this year after nearly 3 decades of local government service here and in the Wairarapa. I've known Kathy since 2000, when we were both involved in the Alliance Party together, and have appreciated her staunch commitment to progressive ideas, her support for me personally, and her passionate advocacy for underdogs, including actual dogs. I hope that I can build on her legacy, especially around working to end homelessness, and I wish her well in her move to the north. Over the years, many people have influenced and supported me to be where I am today, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. None of us have ended up around this table solely by our own efforts, and we will succeed in this arena only if we work with others too. Indeed, I had some help this time around from people who supported my first attempt at getting elected to local government way back in 1997, when I ran for the executive of the Auckland University Students' Association. I won that election against a rival who put a disconcerting image of their own disembodied head on their leaflet. But I did adopt one of their policy ideas, which was putting bright safety tape on the edge of the stairs up to Shadows, the university pub, to reduce falls at night. I served on that student executive in 1998 and again in 1999 with Lotu Fuli and also Afiso Collins. Back then, we were responsible for services and advocacy for over 20,000 students, including governance of a large catering company, some very valuable property, grants to university clubs and societies, a radio station and a weekly magazine. Not so different from a local board, I recognise now. It was a heady time for me in my late teens and early 20s, advocating against central government's proposals to privatise tertiary education, standing up for women's rights and pushing the university to put student wellbeing at the core of their decision making. At the time, I thoroughly rejected the idea that any of that was local government, as that was supremely uncool. Little did I realise I was in fact already hooked. I spent some time after that too unwell to work. I suffered from myalgic encephalitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, and for 3 years I lived like a lazy orange house cat, volunteering for causes I cared about when I could. Eventually, when I was able to work again, I ended up at the Mount Roskill Library as a part-time library assistant. I've always loved libraries and books, and this was a great haven for me as I was emerging from a very shut-in existence. That library is still very much one of my happy places, and I visit often, including helping out as a Justice of the Peace at the CAB, and I did a shift yesterday afternoon. Once I was able to work full-time again, I was employed at several different unions, working mainly on education and organising for union members. I thus have some experience of what it's like to be an officer, to be staff, following the whims of elected members, and I respect the sanctity of the staff room, which gives those valuable opportunities to vent. Most of the time, I worked with early childhood staff and those working in primary schools. Just like at the Students' Association and in local government, it was all about working collaboratively, collectively even, to improve people's lives, this time focused on their day jobs. Like many of the public services of our society, education gets by on the goodwill of those who work in it, going above and beyond what the job description says. I see many parallels with our amazing council staff in that. I think of the officers who over the years answered hard questions, found the money, and generally work hard to make elected members look good. We could not do this without them. In 2010, I was very sceptical about this new super city. I didn't see how it could possibly deliver on all of the promises, and I worried that the local board structure would be too remote from local communities. I threw my hat in the ring for a local ticket at the last minute as someone else had pulled out. I was 8 months pregnant on maternity leave, had no local profile and a toddler, and I had no hopes of getting elected. Indeed, my friend Gwen Shaw, who paid my candidate levy, did not expect that I would be able to pay her back. The team campaigned, but I didn't. Instead, focused on having a baby and looking after the child I already had. I was very shocked to be successful on election day, holding my newborn and already recognising that I was suffering postnatal depression while my eldest stayed with grandparents. I can still remember the dismay I felt about how I could possibly do all this, whatever this even was. And that first term was hard. Those of us who were there will remember. There was a huge level of uncertainty, as no one really knew how things would work. Lots of elected members, particularly those who had been on legacy councils, thought it would just be a very part-time commitment, a hobby even, but it was very quickly apparent it was a 20-hour plus a week professional job, even for local board members. There was just too much to do, too much to set up, too many people to hear from and assist, to just dip in and out for a few hours a month. Luckily, after a little while, the council organisation recognised this too, significantly increasing the staffing support to local boards so that they could become the highly effective configuration they are now, enabling powerful advocacy, meaningful consultation and robust decision-making at the most local level and giving communities a real say. Helping our communities to care loudly, as Leslie Knope would say, is not a quiet or modest undertaking. 12 years on a local board is a long time. It's the longest I've worked in any one place. I'm proud to have contributed to giving Puketapapa a place on the regional map, to building a strong relationship with council departments and CCOs, establishing connections with mana whenua, and delivering some wonderful local projects like Te Aonga and Wesley. I wish the new board good luck for this term and look forward to seeing what working with Albert Eden and Puketapapa local boards from a regional perspective looks like for us all. I said earlier that I used to think local government was deeply uncool, and a lot of people definitely still think that, judging by the low voter turnout. One of my missions since first being elected has been to excite people about the potential of their local council, the ways that they can work with others to make the positive changes no one can make alone, be that in their neighbourhood, their community, their city or beyond. Sometimes what councils need to do is get out of the way, and that's okay, we should definitely do that. Often though, what we can do is provide connections and resources, information and opportunities to share, and articulate clearly the common ambitions that are out there for a better Tamaki Makaurau Auckland. Local government is woven through many facets of our daily lives. Every time we flush the toilet, enjoy the shade of a tree, walk to the dairy, eat at the local Thai place, have a go on a basket swing, even when we hear a ruru while we are writing a speech late at night. Council touches all of these things and more. What we decide and what council does at our direction is at the very heart of what makes a place and its people sing. It's important to me that as many of our people as possible have a say in how those decisions are made, how the priorities, processes and projects are set. At a time when climate action is essential, when social justice is vital, when human connection to each other and the whenua matters so much, the political processes we lead can be a catalyst for positive change. At its heart, a city is about sharing. It's a place where people live together and share resources to make things better. We can help with that, and we can lead by example too. I look forward to sharing the mahi with you all over the next 3 years as we make positive change together. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you, Julie. Could I call Councillor Lotu Fuli to address us? representing the Manukau ward.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Mālo lava le soifua maua ma le langi mama. Kia orana, whakalofalahi atu, taloha ni, namaste, assalamu alaikum, sashri akal, annyeong haseyo, ni hao ma, bonjour, warm Tamaki Makaurau greetings to you all. This morning, Your Worship, can I begin by acknowledging our mana whenua, the people of this land, without whom none of us would be here. I acknowledge yourself as well, Your Worship, and all of our learned colleagues around this table, our governing body and our independent Māori Statutory Board. I acknowledge also our local boards who we share governance with in our beautiful city of Tamaki Makaurau. And I acknowledge also our wider Auckland Council whānau, all of our staff, our officers, our CCOs, our ELT, and the entire team here at Auckland Council. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge my friends and my family, without whom I wouldn't be here. And as Councillor Ferry said, none of us come here on our own. We are supported, and we are awhi'd, and we are loved, and that's how we all get here. I'd like to acknowledge my mother and my father, two of the hardest working people that I know. My mother, I watched raise 9 children. I'm one of 9 children. She worked hard as a school teacher, but before that, she worked hard on the floors of our factories here in New Zealand after we migrated from Samoa. She put herself through training again as a teacher, and then I watched her as well cross the stage at this town hall back in the days when the university used to have our graduations here when she got her Masters of Education. I watched her march down Queen Street alongside her colleagues, teachers, and other members of the union, protesting for pay parity back in the 70s and then in the 80s until it was achieved in the 90s. My mother is an inspiration to me, and I hope to be half the woman that she is. I'd like to acknowledge also my father, who is no longer with us, but I know is here in spirit. I was just explaining to Councillor Sayers that one of the silver linings for me and for my family during the pandemic was that my father was here with us in the last few months of his life. Usually he'd be in Samoa, but because he was trapped here with the borders being closed, we were able to enjoy the last few months he had together as a family. And because I was trapped at home as well, not out as I usually am, working 80 hours a week with the local board, my father and I got to share many TikTok recipes and many good times during the lockdown. And so I acknowledge him as the leader that he was for our community and for my family. My father was a principal in Samoa. He was the first in his family to get tertiary education and the first in our village to achieve tertiary education. And he gave all of that up when he moved here with my mother, with myself and my brother, so that we could have a better life and we could have the opportunities that Aotearoa New Zealand offered to us. And so I acknowledge him and I acknowledge my mother for their service and their contribution to my life. Your Worship, in 2013, I was elected to the Otara Papatoetoe Local Board, and in 2016, I was honoured to also be appointed the chair. And as I reflect on the 9 years that I served on that local board, I'm proud of the many achievements that we were able to make for the people of Otara and Papatoetoe. And as I consider also the achievements of the Mangele o Tahuhu Local Board, the other local board in my Manukau ward, I'm very proud of their achievements as well. But I recognise and I acknowledge that there is still so much more work to do. And so as I sit here as the newly minted Manukau Ward Councillor, alongside my brother and my good colleague, Alf Filipaina, who's still on his way, I'm mindful of that work still ahead. I'm mindful that many of our residents still experience growing inequities. I know that for our kids and our students, and for many of our seniors as well, the digital divide is very real. The pandemic shone a light on that, and as the young people say, all of Aotearoa became woke to this idea of a digital divide. I'm mindful also that housing remains one of the biggest issues for the residents of Manukau. I know from experience many of our families still live in uncertain rental accommodation. They live in their garages, and many of them live in cars, unfortunately, and some on streets. I'm mindful also of the cost of living for our families. Many of our families didn't vote because for them it was more important to find ways to put food on the table, to find ways to get to work, to put petrol in the car so that they could get to where they needed to go. And I'm mindful of this climate crisis that we are in. I know that the residents of Manukau, the residents of places like Manurewa, Papakura, Henderson, Massey as well, they are the least resourced and the least able to resist and to respond to the negative effects of this climate crisis. And so, Your Worship, as I embark on this new term as the Manukau Ward Councillor, all of these things I have in the back of my mind. And I know that when I spoke to you recently, I used the word equity perhaps 100 times in our conversation. And so, as we go forward, please don't be surprised if you hear that word come out of my mouth every single day when I talk to you and when I advocate for the people of Manukau. I look forward to this next 3 years, and I look forward to working alongside you and alongside all of our learned colleagues here in the governing body and in the from the Independent Māori Statutory Board, as we work together to build a thriving and inclusive, a vibrant, a sustainable and a beautiful Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora. I do have a waiata, and I'll invite my good friend Tuiloma up to help me with my waiata. No ukulele today? No ukulele.
Wafa awhetai, wa mali e mata e vaai. Watasi lava oi, ilo unei fa moe moe. Wafa awhetai, wa mali e mata e vaai. Watasi lava oi, ilo unei fa moe moe. Tutalo mai. Shoo.
Thank you.
Much for that. I'd like to invite my own councillor from my area, Councillor Mike Lee from Waitemata and the Gulf Board.
Mr Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, fellow councillors, officers of the Auckland Council, members of the public, tēnā koutou katoa, talofa lava. Congratulations, first of all, to you, Mr Mayor, and my fellow councillors on their successful election. And can I express my thanks to the people who worked to see me returned to this chamber, including people who are here in the room. I also want to express my thanks for the courtesy extended to me to make a maiden speech. Given I was first elected to the Auckland Regional Council over 30 years ago, I'm not, strictly speaking, a maiden in any shape or form. But I appreciate the honour. Though not a maiden, my situation is admittedly unusual. And the question is, I guess, is why have I been returned? And I believe the answer is such an unusual event is due to the fact that the Auckland Council is in a crisis. And I think our Mayor has made that point long and hard over many, many meetings on his very arduous campaign trail. That crisis is financial, but I have to say it's also cultural in the sense of how the council is perceived by the people we are meant to serve. And interestingly enough, this is today exactly is the 12th birthday of the Super City. It started this very day 12 years ago. Now, there is a counter-narrative that I've heard that actually doing quite well, doing very well, really, in circumstances, and any problems the council is suffering is really due to the pandemic. I believe that narrative does not relate to reality, and I think we have to own reality. We have to own the problem before we're able to fix it. Frankly speaking, and I come with the perspective of an outsider, the council group appears to be failing. And it's not one particular CCO or company or section of the Super City that is failing. It's failing across the board. And like the analogy of the dying fish, the failing starts at the top and only can be fixed at the top. And I believe the Mayor, at least, and I include myself in that, have a mandate to set to, as do all of us really, and a responsibility to fix this council group. The news media has not given the financial crisis that much attention, tending to focus, I guess, during an election on personalities rather than numbers. But I must credit the New Zealand Herald with an article, an investigative article that came out last year by Bernard Orsman, and it was entitled Super Rich in the Super City, the companies pocketing 10 billion of ratepayers' money. And this revealed that $10 billion from ratepayers and taxpayers over 10 years went to 20 favoured corporates, mainly Australian-owned construction and public transport companies, but including, of all things, a local recruitment company. The article states, figures provided by the council group under the Official Information Act show Auckland Transport accounts for about 7 billion of the 10 billion spend, Auckland Council 2 billion, and Watercare 1 billion. It goes on to say the Super City has become a $10 billion gold mine for multinational corporations and big local companies. The model of contracting out most of the work of Auckland Council has fed about $10 billion of ratepayers' money to 20 companies since the inception of the Super City in 2010. There is a saying, things will get worse before they get better. And yesterday's Herald seemed to confirm that. There were two headlines, one relating to Auckland Transport. Auckland Transport axing of almost 1,000 bus services to reduce cancellations described as cynical. And then there was another one, more cheerful, I guess, about Fulton Hogan. The company continues to rack up impressive profits. Fulton Hogan was number 2 in the top 20 corporates who were the beneficiaries of the 10 billion. So I think the two stories are related. The fact that 1,000 bus services, which I presume the Auckland Council budgeted for, have been axed, has quite a bit to do with the sensational profits being earned by the number 2 contractor for this organisation. And that means, that may explain why Auckland Transport cannot afford, evidently, or under its contracts, to attract sufficient bus drivers to maintain its committed services. In the past, Auckland was criticised for not spending sufficiently, investing sufficiently in transport, in public transport. Well, that's no longer the case. For many years now, the people of Auckland have been paying well over the odds in an endeavour to get a world-class public transport system. And yesterday we learned, rather than going ahead, and it's interesting timing, isn't it? We're going backwards. So we have some challenges there. In that remarkably joyful ceremony in the town hall last Friday evening, which is obviously the first part of this meeting, all the elected people, all of us, solemnly swore as a condition of our office to uphold the Local Government Act 2002 and the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987. I do question how well we monitor the upholding of our collective promises. One of the most antagonising aspects, irritating aspects of the council that I picked up in the eyes of the public, that I picked up on the campaign trail, was consultation, false, fake consultation, where people are repeatedly asked to have their say, but the council almost, and the CCOs, almost inevitably have their way. And there's a surprising amount of resentment. I heard more about that than I heard about wage rates increases. And so we need to look very seriously at the way public consultation is treated. The Local Government Act, Section 82, principles of consultation, I think needs a lot more study, a lot more consideration than they have been getting. And as a member of the public, despite the explicit requirements of that Act in terms of information regarding a public consultation, that as a member of the public, I decided I should join regarding regional parks. I found it very difficult to obtain information that I believe was absolutely vital for anyone to make a sound decision. It was a legal report. In the end, I had to go to the Ombudsman, and to this day, the Ombudsman and the council officers are still bickering over whether they can get that legal report, whether the Ombudsman can get it. So that's not good enough. Up on the 26th floor of 135 Albert Street, there is a sign that says a lot. It's on its own wooden stand, and it must be used so routinely that it stands there as a permanent fixture. And the sign says, just outside the door, confidential, public excluded. Now, presumably that's to ward off any member of the public interested in Auckland affairs who gets through the security gates on the ground floor and into a security lift. But I think we have to think again about, rethink our attitude and have another look at Part 7 of Lagoima, whereby if a meeting goes into confidential session, there is good legal grounds to do so. And of course, we all know there often is. but to have it routinely, and this happens at local boards as well with the public excluded workshops, I think we have to change that attitude. Mr Mayor, members, I believe this must be a reforming council under Mayor Wayne Brown's leadership for the city, region we love, Auckland. This must be a brand new start. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Following that sobering address, I would like to invite Councillor Karen Leoni from the Faux ward to address us. Thank you.
It's working. E rangatira ma, e rangi tahi ma, nā mihi nui tātou, nā mihi nā mana whenua, nā mihi tikapa moana, nā mihi nā maunga o Tamaki Makaurau. Tihei mauri ora. Tēnā koutou nā rangatira mā. Ka hui hui mai nei tēnei rā. Ki te taho tōku mama no te tai tokerau ahau, Far North. Ko Ngāti Kuri, ko Ngāi Takoto, tōku iwi. I te taho tōku papa, ko Ngāti Pāua te iwi, no Waiheke Island ahau. He mana whenua ahau o Tamaki Makaurau. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora to all of my colleagues today, some new and some I have known throughout my political journey. I acknowledge the Mayor and councillors. Congratulations to you all, and I look forward to working together over the next 3 years for a better and beautiful Tamaki Makaurau. I want to start by acknowledging all those who voted for me in Faux, West Auckland, Avondale, New Lynn, Green Bay, Rosebank and Blockhouse Bay. Thriving, growing communities who want to see progressive leadership for their people. I want to acknowledge the Faux Labour campaign team, Jacques, Kay and Claire, and my wider campaign team who door-knocked, gave out leaflets at train stations and believed in the skills that I can contribute to the governing body in Tamaki Makaurau. I want to give particular acknowledgement to Annika Sorensen, Brooke Loader, Narissa Henry, Lotu Fuli, Marjorie McLean and Anthony Phillips, who supported me in my initial conversations, and particularly Annika, who has been a support person travelling from other parts of the country to support the campaign, because we both believe in breaking glass ceilings in all spaces and ensuring that especially those who have been marginalised in the past in all sectors of our communities forge forward when opportunities arise to step forward and take these spaces. A few more acknowledgements. My Nana, Marguerite Leoni, Linda Salmon, my auntie, my Irish grandfather, Len Salmon, my Italian grandfather, Roy Leoni, and to my parents. To mentors, currently and previous local board members, the Waitemata local board chair, Richard Northey, to the previous councillor, Pippa Coombe, who has been an amazing mentor for me, as well as the local board members, Glenda Fryer, Alex Bonham, Julie Sanderlands, Adriana Christie, Graham Gunthorpe, and the wider City Vision whānau. I can't miss out my in-laws, of course, because they provided the childcare whilst on campaign. So I do want to thank my mother-in-law, Kira, and my sister-in-law, Tina, the father of my children, Damien Howai, my 5-year-old twins, who have taken the reins of childcare over the past 6 months, and this would not be possible without their tautoko and support. My political journey started at high school over on Waiheke Island, starting a youth group over there many, many years ago. At that time, I received a certificate from the Mayor, Les Mills, so you're guessing that's more than 20 years ago now. And at that time, I was also starting my whakapapa journey in the far north in Kaitaia, when I received the news that I was going to receive this award. I remember hitchhiking back down to Auckland with my uncle Mangu Awaro to receive this award from Les Mills, not because we didn't have the money to drive a car down, but just because we did. And I think this is an example, if we're talking about emissions-free, it's a great example of how we would think back then, 20 years ago, where we felt safe enough to be able to do these things. I went on to complete my first degree at AUT in Māori development and in social services. I worked in South Auckland, working with some of our most vulnerable communities at that time, working for child, youth and family. So I believe my initial beginnings in politics and understanding some of the challenges we face in this city, I've definitely experienced more than 20 years ago and seen them at the front line. I then started my first master's at the age of 20 in youth development, then moved over to the UK, running my own consultancy company for 10 years, completing my second master's in international politics and economics. I started a charity sending young Māori in Pacifica to London to link in with New Zealand-owned businesses and know that there is more to life than just what they see in front of themselves here. I came home to Aotearoa to Tamaki Makaurau because I knew there were still significant areas of equality that we have not broken through yet. And I want to be part of that continual movement forward. I've mentioned on Friday that I'm one of the first Wahine Māori councillors of the Super City. I want to add to that by saying I acknowledge my Italian whakapapa too, and I don't think we've had an Italian councillor. So fast forward 20 years from when I first received that award from Les Mills, I'm here as a regional councillor. And I come back to my regional issues that I want to address over the next 3 years. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the original mana whenua of Tamaki Makaurau, the 19 iwi, that we know once managed the planning, transport, housing, pathways and communal activities for thriving with their pā sites, their waka, their canoes, their tribal areas and communities across Tamaki Makaurau. And I strongly believe the political system should ensure mana whenua are at all levels of decision-making today, 180 years since the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. My regional issues I would like to see supported included our economic recovery from COVID, supporting our business associations to thrive and have the support they need to get back on their feet. Ensuring our infrastructure is prioritised, that we have clean water and that the Hauraki Gulf has the attention it needs. That our transport links move towards those similar to cities like London, where we can get across the city on reliable transport and on time. That we also move towards a 10 to 15 minute city that from our home we can access transport, parks, health centres and supermarkets. This is what we need here in Tamaki Makaurau and this is what we deserve. That we also feel safe in our communities and that we have regional strategies to prioritise our rangatahi, our future leaders of Auckland and Tamaki Makaurau. So coming back to the foe, first of all, I want to acknowledge our mana whenua and ki iwi there, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei and Te Kawerau Maki. Our growing community, Māori, Pacifica, multicultural ethnic communities and our long-term residents. I also acknowledge our community hubs doing the hard grassroots mahi work in their communities, Blockhouse Bay, Glenavon, Kelston, Rosebank, the Newland Community Centre, to name a few. I have my shopping list for my community. First on my list is a swimming pool in Fo. For our growing population and families, we have Our closest pools are in the Waitakere ward and Albert Eden Puketipapa ward. We need to have our own swimming pool in Fo. If we look at our current statistics, Fo will have one of the most significant growing populations. Intensification is upon us, and we need to ensure we are advocating for the best community facilities and green spaces possible. Secondly, the Avondale Community Hub, which has been in consultation for an extensive period of time, I would like to see that actually initiated in this term. A youth hub for our rangatahi, and looking at how we can work with our young people and with central government and funding organisations for life skills education towards budget management, home ownership and housing, breaking the cycles of poverty. We cannot only rely on central government to break these cycles of poverty. Local government should also have a primary role to play in this. And I strongly believe in systems like the UK, where the local government actually have a lot more budget to be able to reach our needy communities, needs to happen. On the note of housing, I've been working in the mana whenua space on housing developments across Tamaki Makaurau. Again, working in partnership with central government, we need to look at more shared equity home ownership schemes, rent to buy, so Aucklanders feel they are working hard in their chosen professions towards something they can see an outcome for. I think about the hard-working parents in Auckland working 2 jobs a week to cover their rent and costs for children, managing our high cost of living. What can we, as the decision makers of Tamaki Makaurau, do to ease this pressure? What do we already have in place? Community gardens have traditionally fed thousands of people in Te Ao Māori, and we have vacant land sitting there not being used to benefit our communities. Safer communities in Fo. I acknowledge the stabbing that took place a few weeks ago, but I want to ensure our residents feel that we have the best plans possible, working with the police and with Māori wardens around prevention of future incidents. Retaining our green spaces for our growing communities, and the Te Fo pathway, cleaning up the Fo River. More recently, my whanaunga mentioned she used to swim in the Fo River when she was a child. This is how it can be and it should be for our tamariki. Regarding the pathways, if our lovely neighbours in Ōrākei have amazing pathways, the Fo should have those amazing pathways too. This is where we need to look at ensuring all of our wards have access to funds to move our projects forward. Safe communities with good housing, reliable and effective transport and green spaces with amazing community facilities is what I would like to see in the Fo. Finally, supporting our business associations for our economies to thrive are crucial, so I can ensure that I'm going to do the best I can to advocate for business growth and new entrepreneurship. Social enterprises are a key priority. The great thing is we know you don't need a degree to start a business necessarily. And definitely when you look at people like Richard Branson, who was also dyslexic, and I don't think even finished high school or university, was able to achieve this. So if we can keep in the front of our minds as decision makers, the most affluent in the city as well as the most vulnerable, I think we are going to do an amazing job. It is crucial that we make the right decisions for our future generations to come and adhere to the vision of Te Tiriti o Waitangi for mana whenua and the residents of Tamaki Makaurau to lead the city and make the best combined decisions for our people. Nō reira, he aha te mea nui, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. I guess I'll sing a waiata. If anyone would like to join me, you're more than welcome to. It's Te Aroha. Te Aroha, Te Whakapono, me te rangi mari e, tātou e. Ano, again. te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mari e tātou tātou e. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Kieran Leoni. Could I call upon Councillor Ken Turner, another Westie from Waitakere?
Thank you very much. Mr Mayor, fellow councillors, ladies and gentlemen, council staff. Wow is the word that comes to mind. My standing here today is a result of a journey I embarked on 9 years ago. A journey that would have fallen short of its destination without the support of my beautiful wife Helen and family. I set out to fix wrongs. I felt unheard, unrepresented and irrelevant. Many of the people around me felt the same, and they too encouraged and supported me. And God gave me naivety. Many times in my life I've looked back and said, if I had known then what I know now. And what I know now is the dedication, hard work and cost it takes to be a good advocate for the people. I have gone through a second apprenticeship at an age when many are contemplating retirement. And to my fellow elected members here, whether I agree with you or vehemently disagree with you, you have my respect and admiration. My travels have brought me many good friends and teammates. It has taught me patience, it has taught me how to listen, it has taught me how to be less judgmental. I have learned we have a lot in common. Above all, it has focused my purpose. I am very clear. I am here to represent the people. I understand that I'm now a working part of council, but the people have set my job description. I am to be their eyes, ears and voice. I understand that a councillor has a regional responsibility to act in the best interests of Auckland, but that said, a healthy and prosperous Waitakere benefits the whole of Auckland. There are many challenges ahead, but the biggest challenge is to stay level-headed. I entered the workforce as an apprentice mechanic in 1973. Before that decade was over, we had Carless Days, a government emergency initiative to avoid a fossil fuel shortage. Here I am 50 years later, still with a fossil fuel problem, only this time it's because we're using too much. My entire adult life, the background conversation has been about energy. Responding to that first problem, the automotive industry went through huge technological advancements. In the 1970s, to have suggested the driving controls of a car would be physically separated from the mechanical responses, and that the driver's accelerator pedal would become a potentiometer, electronically delivering the driver's desires to an engine management computer, which in turn assured that the responses to his requests were delivered in the most fuel-efficient way, would have been considered pure science fiction. But today that is the reality, and it reduces emissions just when we need it to the most, despite that not having been the primary objective. Yet silly people who seem uninterested in what has gone before now see fit to install speed humps in regular intervals along our roads, forcing drivers to toggle between the brake and accelerator pedal, and in doing so rendering the gains of all this technological advancement useless. In fact, worse than useless. For 26 years of the last 50 years, I also operated a small pig farm. In the late 80s, when I began, there was over 20 pig farmers in Auckland area. We all supplied Auckland Council's municipal abattoirs. Like most of the other farmers, I fed my pigs food scraps. It has only recently dawned on me that my primary benefit to Auckland was not supplying pork, but helping to process Auckland's food scraps. Today, as a result of council decisions, there are 3 commercial-scale pig farms in Auckland, and none are feeding food scraps. And we are about to truck our city's food scraps, which are 80% water, to Reparoa north of Taupo. Transporting this food scrap south will add over 2 million kilos of carbon emissions annually. Yet council staff maintain this carbon emissions are zero because the food scraps are backhauled, filling otherwise empty trucks which cart aggregate from the same regions back to Auckland. But that's only because we've closed most of the quarries near to our city. Actions like these flies in the face of technical advancement and rational thinking. People have asked me to focus on core issues in a way that helps make affordable and lasting change. To do this, we need to think holistically. We need to ask those three core questions: compared to what, at what cost, and what are the facts? And we need to ensure we don't throw common sense and public money out the window. Lastly, I've also been asked to defend our open spaces and public access to them. Auckland is a great place to live and work, and this is underpinned by our Kiwi way of life. We are the city of sails, moreover, the city of swimmers, surfers, fishermen, trampers, runners and bikers. It is Auckland's great outdoors and the people's access to it which sets us up as a most livable city. As our city intensifies, our access to nature and green spaces becomes more essential to people's health and well-being. I'd also like to add a little bit in here. I think I need to acknowledge Linda Cooper, the councillor before me, and for her hard work, and wish her all the best in the future. I'm looking forward to working alongside all of you over the next 3 years as we lead Auckland. Thank you.
And last but not least, I'd like to invite a person who's definitely not a maiden, Councillor Morris Williamson from Howick.
Well, a very good morning to you all, and coming at the end of a very long list of phenomenal speeches, I sort of feel a bit like Elizabeth Taylor's 8th husband. I know what's expected of me, but how am I going to make it interesting for you? Well, I thought I might just do a little bit about me, because most of you think I'm a right-wing, evil, horn devil. But there's a few things you need to know. I'm terribly socially liberal. I supported the homosexual law reform bill in 1986. I supported gay marriage. I supported prostitution reform. I, as a health minister, distributed clean needles for the needle exchange program and funded the Prostitutes Collective to go out and produce their safe sex message. In the broadcasting portfolio, I set up 23 Maori radio stations. I established Te Reo Whakapuaki Irirangi, which you will know as Te Manga Pāho. And when My FM in Auckland was about to go tip over, I bulk funded them for 3 years of their money so that My FM could carry on, and it's now one of our most successful radio stations. So although I'm terribly fiscally conservative, I'm very, very socially liberal. And I'm very strongly of a view that we've got to stop spending money we don't have, and we've got to stop sending the bill to a future generation. And accumulating debt is a ghastly thing for any of us to be doing for a future generation. And I don't want anybody here to be putting up suggestions for anything unless they are absolutely confident they know where the funding for that will come from, or whether we'll be taking it off another program. I went to Bill Birch once to get some funding for a medication for migraine headaches. He was finance minister and he said, "You should be putting this on the Farm Act schedule." Well done, Minister. I was surprised, but my surprise soon ended as I walked out of his room and he said, "Just let me know what part of your health budget you'll be taking the 35 million out of, because there's no new money." And that's something we should be doing on every one of the decisions we take around this table if you've got something. Now, my predecessor, Paul Young, in this portfolio, wrote a really big article in the Howick and Pakuranga Times recently about these wonderful things that he would do if he became the councillor again. And every one of them were fantastic, about helping businesses with ram raiders and doing, it was a brilliant list. But I'm sorry, not one of them is the role of council. My view is we've got to get our core role and functions identified and focus on delivering those, and those things that are central government, we should advocate and agitate for central government to be solving those problems. I'm also concerned about CCOs and places like Auckland Transport who seem to spend their time in search of problems that don't exist. The money that's been spent in my electorate doing things like putting all sorts of speed humps and stuff around a local school, but when asked, and finally through Lagoima, Turned out there hadn't been any injuries, any accidents or anyone hurt, but they'd spent a lot of money experimenting with putting new things in. When I was Minister of Transport, I fought for a long time to move the Pakuranga Highway to 60 kilometres an hour from 50. Now, it won't be of any interest to most of you, but let me tell you, that road carries more vehicles per day than any other road in New Zealand other than State Highway 1 around Tip Top Corner through to Newmarket. More than any other road in New Zealand. It was 50 kilometres per hour and nobody observed it. And I've got a video I can play to you any time of me as Transport Minister driving up that highway with the television cameras in the back of my car, filming my speedometer doing 67 kilometres for TV that night, Minister of Transport breaking the law, and then they panned to a car beside it and it was a police car doing the same. And now we've got to 60, the speed limits, the speed of the vehicles dropped because people would comply with a sensible speed limit. And now Auckland Transport saying, no, we're going to take it back to 50. Well, no one will adhere to it. And in fact, as far as I'm concerned, it's the lunatics running the asylum. If I go back to the economic stuff, I find it really, really galling to come onto a council where one of the biggest expenditure items, the City Rail Link, we have no idea what that number is. We have no idea. Now, you simply would not do a renovation or build a new house and wait for the builder to come back and tell you that was 1.8 million. You would say to the builder, what's it going to cost to do the following? Let's put it in writing, and if there's any variation, we pay for the costings of the variation individually. And I find it galling that a number that I think is going to make your eyes water when we finally do see it. And it's just wrong that that should be happening. So I think we need to address a whole lot of efficiencies and so on within the place. I'm a big fan of public transport, but only where it makes sense and only where it's got the users and the numbers. But in my ward of Howick, in the last census, 92.8% of people used the private motor car or were a passenger in the private motor car or used a work vehicle for their going to and from work. 92.8%. And so I'm really trying to make desperately sure we represent their views along with the 3% that are either into cycling or walking or using the ferries at 1%. I'm not saying that's wrong for them not to have their bits, but 92.8% count as well in my view. I've served on some company boards. I was on the Holyoke Industry Board for 21 years. We turned in around 12 million EBITDA every year. And I know the biggest difference between governance and management, and so many people in the parliamentary system, I think, didn't understand that. My view is we're governors. We're here to set goals and targets and then hold management to account for the delivery of such. I'm a big fan of evidence-based. When I bought in the photo driver's licence, I was absolutely caned by the news media. Leighton Smith ran a program daily about how disgraceful it was. Williamson was wanting to bring in an ID card. That's what this is. It's a bloody ID card. Another guy on News Talk ZB called Chris Carter, not the politician, said that if Williamson bought in the photo driver's licence, he'd leave New Zealand. So I phoned him up on air and said it was a great, and he said, oh, you don't like my son? I said, happy. I just want to know where it is you're going, because I don't know any other country in the Western world or the developed world that doesn't have a photo on its driver's licence. And it actually followed a year later with the biggest drop in the road toll that this country has ever experienced, because we were able to get the bad buggers off the road by identifying them at roadside with their photo. So I'm evidence-based. I've got a degree in computer science and in physics. If you want any help with splitting the helium nucleus, I'm really good at it. And I use the evidence-based computer systems I've got to generate a full amount of data before I rush in to make expressions of what I think count and what I think don't count. With regards to relationships, I never saw people on the other side of Parliament as my enemies. I always saw them as opponents. Enemies were people you had on your own side. And I can tell you that for 30 years at Parliament, I had the same senior private secretary, Bridie Wilkinson, and in my electorate, the same electorate agent, Carla Mickelson, for 30 years. So I've had a good relationship with staff. I've never had a personal grievance or even the sight of one with the hundreds, no thousands of staff that have either worked for me or answered to me. So I find that good. Got one small issue on my plate at present. I've got a 99-year-old mother. I am the only child. She lives in our own family home in Matamata. She's 1 month away from a letter from King Charles, so we're looking forward to that. But I have to be up and down that highway quite a bit to Matamata to sort of get her through the next small time. I think her time will come to an end quite soon. So I want to say thank you to you all. I'm here for a short time at my age because I can walk into a forest and be the oldest living thing there. I'm not here for a long time, but I'm here to try and make a difference. And I want to finish with a quote about the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan didn't do what he did just because he was good. He also had the money and he could afford to do it. Thank you very much.